So first of all, an opening question on a more macro level. This pandemic has engulfed the entire world. The impact, as we all know, every one of us knows this, feels this on a daily basis, is huge, perhaps even unprecedented in terms of the global nature of this impact. And our question to you is, our opening question is, what does the Torah say about pandemics? And how should we as Jews respond? And if I can just point that question and ask you, what does God want from us? Rabbi Friedman.
To second guess God is always a risky thing. To speak in his name and put words in his mouth is always a little dangerous. But what response has traditionally been the Jewish one, recommended by our sages and so on? There are a few things that we need to take into consideration. Firstly, that nothing happens by chance. Nothing happens by accident. And nothing happens by plague. We have to really be careful about this. For example, we get very upset when we hear another person died from the plague. But if he died from something else, oh, okay, that's not so bad. This thinking has got to be avoided and rejected. Every death is horrible. Every death is tragic. And the cause of death, whatever the doctors write on the paper, is really quite irrelevant. Nobody is dying because there is a plague going around. It's not the plague. It's a divine plan. No one will die unless it is right for them to die. Don't get into that mood or into that thinking that the plague is out of control and it's taking lives. The plague has no will of its own. It has no thoughts of its own. And it certainly has no authority of its own. So panicking is definitely the wrong response. In fact, the panic itself could be as dangerous as the disease. So it needs to be avoided completely. Another thing we need to look at is what in the moral sphere, what is this plague doing? Anything that causes people to deteriorate morally is a terrible and ungodly disaster. When something causes people to improve morally, then there's a definite, at least a silver lining, but there's definitely a positive dimension to what's going on. Like in the story of Purim, when the threat of genocide hung over the Jewish people, they became much better morally, which told us that this is going to end well. So wherever you see moral improvement, you know that this is moving in a good direction. So the tragedies are certainly real and as tragic as any other tragedy, but evil is not showing, it is not present. We're seeing goodness, a lot of goodness. And we're told that in the end of days, all concealment will be removed. Everything will be out in the open. So what we need to expect is that all evil that had been hiding will be unmasked, and all good that we hadn't noticed will be revealed. So goodness will come from places we didn't expect, and bad behavior will come from places we did not expect. So things are becoming clarified. Things are becoming open. And what we need to do is make sure that whatever is going on it causes us to become better. That's how we measure whether the world is good or bad. Not by how healthy it is or how happy it is, but by how moral it is. We need to keep our eye on that. Wherever morality is improving, there's going to be good results. We're moving in a good direction. So people who are now stuck at home with their families, there's a major improvement that is both necessary and welcome. People at first, if you remember, it seems like so long ago, when we were told to be quarantined to our homes, people panicked. How are we going to survive being home with our kids? How are we going to survive being home with each other? We never get along that well. To be locked up in the house 24 hours for weeks and who knows how long, this is going to be a disaster. In fact, the officials were all predicting that domestic violence is going to radically increase and get out of control. That has not happened as far as we know. The opposite has happened. People who did not get along very well suddenly saw each other in a different light. They started to look good to each other. Spending all this time with our children has turned out to be the pleasure of life for the children and for the parents. So a lot of sobering goodness. Can you imagine what kind of a life were we living when the thought of spending time with your children was horrifying, when the thought of being alone together with your spouse was terrifying? There was something seriously wrong with our lifestyle. And this has vastly improved. And it will remain. We're not going to slip back to the old habits after this. So we need to focus on the moral issues, the moral temperature of the universe, of the world, to see whether we are making progress or slipping back. So we should look forward to a much better world when this thing is over. I think that's pretty much the sum of what God wants. But I got to tell you this little story. Many years ago on Sukkot in Crown Heights, it was raining heavily, and it just wouldn't stop. And Chassidim, of course, wanted to eat in the sukkah, and they would eat in the sukkah if it was just a normal rain. So you get a little wet, nicht gefährlich, but this rain was really impossible. So they waited, and they waited for the rain to stop, or at least slow down, and it wouldn't. So somebody said to the Rebbe, "What does God want? Why won't he let us eat in the sukkah?" And the Rebbe said, "What does God want? That you should go into the house where it's dry and warm and comfortable and enjoy a Yom Tov meal. That's what God wants." What does God want of us today? He wants us to be home, enjoy our children, and for those people who are alone, enjoy being alone. That's what God wants. And it's so good for most people.